At its core, poverty is not having enough. The heart of the debate on what poverty means is enough of what. While some approaches, like the American Official and Supplementary Poverty Measures, answers this question with income, we argue that a holistic understanding of poverty answers with choice. We take into account not just income, but real freedom and the capability to achieve a good life. If people are incapable of doing and being the things that allow them a minimally decent life, regardless of income, they are by this definition experiencing poverty. As we've already said, traditional poverty measures look at income, either absolutely with a hard numeric threshold or relative based on comparisons to people who live in your same country. In the United States, the official poverty measure, what we'll call the OPM, looks just at gross annual income before taxes, including cash government benefits like temporary assistance for needy families and Social Security benefits. The Supplemental Poverty Measure, also known as SPM, was introduced later to expand poverty's definition in the states. Rather than just accounting for cash benefits, the SPM also looks at the non-cash benefits that makes a difference in individuals' quality of life. Some of these benefits are SNAP, also known as Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, WIC, the SNAP extension for women, infants, and children, housing vouchers, free and reduced school lunch, and more. It also takes account of diverse household structures that were previously excluded by the OPM. While we attempt to break from the mindset that poverty is only about financial means, we recognize the benefit of these definitions and the good they've brought. Absolute measures like the Global Extreme Poverty Measure are an important baseline to identify and aid the people in the most dire living states. Additionally, this measure's objectivity and stability make for consistent measurement that can be compared across time and region. Relative measures, too, which are mostly used in high-income countries, do a good job at capturing the effective aspect of poverty, which come from seeing those around you having and accessing things that you cannot have or access. Relative measures begin to explore the idea that poverty isn't just about what you earn, but how it feels to be relatively deprived. The American OPM and SPM have been crucial for identifying and providing resources to Americans in need. They are adjusted annually to try to keep up with inflation and changing monetary needs and account for the basic material needs like food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. They also look at household structures rather than individuals, considering and accounting for the different needs and income of different age groups and family makeups. The SPM also helpfully deducts non-discretionary expenses like necessary medications and, of course, taxes to make a more realistic picture of what Americans are actually taking home. Income-based approaches have many benefits and have aided in the global efforts that have tanked income-based poverty over the past couple centuries. However, in the modern understanding of the good life and contributors to struggle, our standards have increased from wanting people to just be surviving to wanting people to lead more fully meaningful and comfortable lives. Therefore, these approaches have some drawbacks under this new understanding. Firstly, they don't account for non-income indicators of class and social status that influence self-perception and others' understandings and judgments of the individual. While income continues to make up an undeniably significant portion of class and the ability to present oneself as they wished, so do education, the ability to rest, and social ties. Secondly, purely income-based approaches don't make a mention of how the income is earned and at what expense to the individual. Hours worked, physical and mental toll, and level of enjoyment are all unaccounted for. As long as they end up with the same income, a desk job worker and a prostitute are equally poor or not poor, according to these measures. Overall, what all these approaches miss is that it's not about the money you have, but what you're able to do with it, and the parts of life that are about money at all. People aren't all the same, and their internal and external capabilities combine to enable and constrain what they can choose to be and do. Rather than looking at having, we want to look at freedom to choose a dignified life. One definition of poverty that completely turns away from the notion that poverty is just to do with income is the capabilities approach, introduced by Martha Nussbaum and developed by Amartya Sen. The capabilities approach focuses, as the name implies, on capabilities, which are the opportunities an individual has to achieve the things they want to do and be. Capabilities are distinguished from functionings, which are capabilities that have been acted upon or achieved. The whole group of capabilities an individual has the freedom to choose from is referred to as their capability set. The capabilities approach, we believe, is a better way to assess overall well-being than income-focused approaches because it changes the focus from means, income, to ends, action, and abilities. Just because two people have similar sets of resources doesn't mean they can do the same things with them, because their capability sets are advantages or disadvantages that may make them more or less able to realize certain ones. The capabilities approach understands that just because you have a capability doesn't mean you want to or will turn that into a functioning. In this way, we leave room for understanding people as unique individuals who have the freedom to choose their lives. Though we don't wish to force anyone to do things they don't want to, even if we believe it's in their best interest, we want that healthy path to be an option available to them. People are unique and diverse and want different lives, and by focusing on capabilities, we look to ensure that as many doors are open to them as possible. To illustrate the difference between capabilities and functionings, take the hypothetical example of Lily and Jenny. Lily and Jenny are both registered to vote. They both own a car and have flexibility in their work schedules to get to their polling stations on the date and time of this year's presidential election. They both have a TV and a smartphone to keep up with the news and are informed about politics and what policies work. With the assets available to them, both Lily and Jenny have the capability to vote. However, while Lily agrees strongly with one candidate and decides to go vote, Jenny can't stand either candidate and decides to stay away from the polls this year. Lily turned her capability into a functioning while Jenny did not. Both made free choices. The Multidimensional Poverty Index, also known as MPI, developed on the basis of the capabilities approach, serves as a good baseline measurement to encompass more than just income. MPI consists of 3 dimensions: health, education, and living standards. These dimensions are broken down into subcategories that are served as good indicators for these 3 main dimensions. For health, the subcategories are nutrition and child mortality. For education, their years of schooling and school attendance. For living standards, it's cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets like a bike or radio. While the MPI does well to move away from income and toward what income may enable you to do, it conflates capability and functionality, which disguises the point that not all capabilities are acted upon, and foregone opportunities are sometimes just the preference of the individual. For example, an individual may choose to not go to college, although he or she has the means to do so. According to the capabilities approach, the non-college attendee isn't any less deprived than the person who went to college because it was not an inability but choice that made the difference. What matters to us is not whether something has been done, but whether it could reasonably have been done. With this distinction, we leave room for individual freedom of choice. Our definition of poverty is one of capability. To be leading a life without poverty, a person needs to have the opportunity to fulfill their health, education, living standard, and freedom needs. To measure this, we edit and expand upon the measurement system of the MPI to shift measures from the accomplishment of different goals to assess to achieving the goals. We also add further indicators to shift out standards higher from simple survival to a life enriched with freedom and enjoyment. Lastly, we add a 4th dimension, freedom, that looks at the macro level, particularly government influences, on individuals' quality of life and choice. Our health dimension includes the following indicators: nutrition, child mortality, access to preventative health care, access to emergency health care, and access to assisted living for the elderly and disabled. The education dimension includes ratio of years of schooling to desired years of schooling, ratio of attendance rate to desired attendance rate, ability to attend school of choice, access to pre-kindergarten, and access to childcare in the absence of the primary caretaker. Living standards indicators include access to cooking fuel and equipment, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, assets, entertainment, access to social groups, free time, transportation, access to communication technologies, internet connection, and environmental health. Finally, the freedom dimension includes the following indicators: the freedom of speech and thought, affiliation and expression, the right to protest and criticize the government, vote, run for office, and the existence of free and fair elections. This measurement system doesn't bucket people into poor or not poor. Rather, it creates a range of poverty, and each infringement upon the preceding indicators is a sign of increasing deprivation. Some may argue that our definition of poverty isn't poverty. If someone is making 6 figures but doesn't have free time, how can we possibly consider them somewhat poor? To this, we have two responses. Firstly, this person may have the capability to switch jobs and or reduce their hours while still making enough money to cover their basic needs. Therefore, their lack of free time is a choice, and thus the capability exists, although the execution of that capability is not occurring. Secondly, we reiterate that the definition we use isn't about income, and so they still could technically be poor in that sense, even with high income. Income does very often correlate with the freedom to make choices, and it does often enable capabilities, but not in every case. Another critique of this approach is its implied call for a lot of government spending against violated capabilities, for which many people are likely unwilling to pay. Like political writer Robert Rector might think, it makes little sense to ensure people are getting enough entertainment when others lack housing and nutrition. We agree that certain deprivations are more corrosive to overall well-being than others. It makes good sense to target those issues, like political oppression and homelessness, with more resources. However, this approach still finds the other deprivations to be problems, even if they are not of the most immediate urgency. Unlike Rector's argument, it recognizes that people can experience poverty even though they have certain resources. Although income is often necessary to lead the life of one's choosing, it is not sufficient. To understand poverty, we need to identify that factors, both internal and external to the person, that limit their capabilities and act so that they are no longer buried.